Of the Town Council of the Town of Fort Myers Beach. It's Monday, the 1st of November. All council members are present, town manager, town attorney, town clerk, members of the public. The fire chief is here as well, and we'll start as always with the invocation followed by the Pledge of Allegiance.
Gathered together here today, intent on doing good work. We seek to represent fairly and well those who have given us this task. May our efforts be blessed with insight, guided by understanding and wisdom. We seek to serve with respect for all. May our personal faiths give us strength to act honestly and well in all matters before us. Amen.
Amen. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The next item on the agenda is the approval of the final agenda. Is there a motion to approve the final agenda?
I'll move to approve.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Any objection? Motion carries unanimously. Next item is public comment.
I have nobody signed up.
Anybody that wishes to speak, come right up, sir. Okay.
My name is Brandon Prince. I'm with the Angels Diamond Construction. Be available at the time of discussion for the construction traffic mitigation plan and public safety plan. So,
Very good.
you guys ask questions.
What's your, are you the, you're not the superintendent, are you the
I'm
superintendent?
the assistant project manager.
Assistant project manager, all right. Good, how's it going so far?
So far, so good. Going
Man.
well.
All right, good.
How long is this going to be closed?
The duration of the construction project, so approximately 16 months after Hudson Street opens back up.
I saw you have contingency plans for the neighboring businesses with the lighthouse.
Okay, well, thanks for stopping in. Thank you. Okay, anyone else wish to speak in the audience? Did you want to come up?
Thank you, Mr. Herdenstead, Mr. Mayor, Council. I wanted to officially come and present myself before this body this morning, introduce myself officially as the new fire chief for the Fort Myers Beach Fire Control District. Even though we're separate entities, we work very cooperatively, and I am all of your fire chief as well. So I just wanted to come and introduce myself. Thank you for your messages of support, and we look forward moving forward as a district working cooperatively with the town of Fort Myers Beach, one of our most critical partners. If myself or my staff could be of any resources to you, please feel free to reach out. Thank you all.
We sure appreciate that, Chief, and you've heard all the accolades already, but we congratulate you again and wish you the best in your position. You'll do just fine. Okay. Anyone else? Hearing none, we'll move on to the next item, which is local achievements and recognitions. Start up here with Councilman Allers.
I just want to thank the Bay Oaks, Community of Bay Oaks, anyone that volunteered for the Fright Night. That was a pretty fun event. Anyone that had a chance to go out and see it, it was really fun. And also yesterday at the Beach Baptist, they had a trunk or treat event. Unfortunately, I was unable to make it, but it looked like it was quite the event.
And I was going to thank Beach Baptist for putting on Trunk or Treat, huge success. Not only thank Beach Baptist, but the huge number of volunteers and donations that they get from the community. There were hundreds of kids there having a wonderful time. It's a wonderful community event, and really thank the church for putting it on.
Councilman Adderholt.
Take a little different twist this morning. This past weekend, I had the pleasure of having 36 of my former fraternity brothers in town last weekend. We had a reunion on Fort Myers Beach, and we were at the Wyndham Hotel, and the outrigger was our spillover hotel. And I wanted to thank Maxine from the Wyndham. It was an awesome hotel for everyone because it was within walking distance to everything that we wanted to do. And my fraternity brothers are known to have a libation here or there, so we could walk everywhere, which was great. And Mike from Pinchers and his staff, the wait staff was spectacular. We had dinner at the Steel Waterfront Dining Thursday night. So Al and Kathy Durrett, thank you for that. We had the game itself was at the Sandbar, and we were able to reserve the back room there. The Purdue-Wisconsin game where Wisconsin was victorious. I want to thank Craig, Christy, Jason, and again, the wait staff. Wow, just tremendous folks there, and made everybody feel very welcome. We have a term called Hoosier hospitality in Indiana, and we clearly demonstrated hospitality from this island. All the people were from all over the country. And again, we went over to Oliver's after that dinner. Susan from Oliver's was great. Just that hospitality. Everybody felt so welcome on this island. And of course, we know it's already a paradise, but I just wanted to thank all the waitstaff in particular for showing so much hospitality. It's such a great place to host an event, and I just want to thank everybody involved. That's all I've got. Thank you.
To unleash all the women and children now?
It is safe
Okay.
now. Yes,
All
thank
right.
you,
We'll
Mr. Mayor.
put the word-
I'm sorry you had to endure a couple of the fellas on Thursday night.
It's good to meet him. Good to meet him. Bill?
I'd like to thank the sheriff's office for putting on extra duty to keep those frat boys under control. No, but aside from
Notice we did that pre-camera, which was by design, yeah.
Beside what Councilman Aller said, Jennifer Rusk and her husband have put up one of the little free libraries on Miramar, which is now open. I know of 4 of those now on the island, so if anybody's interested in doing it, reach out to me or anybody, and can put more up.
Okay. I'll just echo what everyone else said earlier about the Bay Oaks Fright Night. I want to thank Allison and her team, and the chief and his team, all the firefighters that always volunteer for that and do a great job. And it was fun to serve with Betty Simpson and Sarah here from Town Hall as judges in the costume contest. That was a lot of fun. So anyhow, we'll move on from there, and the next item is the Advisory Committee items and reports, and I think we have Catherine Light here from the Anchorage Advisory Committee.
Morning, I'm Kathy Light, from Chair of the Anchorage Advisory Committee. You should have gotten just a kind of an outline of what we're going to talk about, of what we're kind of working on in your packet. The first item was the submerged land lease, which the town has executed, and it combines our current field, which is east of the bridge, with the new to be expanded field in the west of the bridge. It's my understanding we're trying to include the dinghy dock, but there's some hangups on that, so that's not included in that. And so we're kind of moving forward with that, and that came before you, I think, in your last meeting. Do you have any questions about that at the moment?
The dinghy dock, you're talking about the one that would be by Bayfront Park?
No, the one that it currently exists that's under the bridge. It's my understanding that we were going to try to combine all of the land, because they all had separate land leases. There was a land lease when that dinghy dock was made, separate from the mooring field, and then this new expansion mooring field. And the idea was to combine all 3, but it's my understanding with the dinghy dock, the current dinghy dock land lease, that there's some things, because Department of Transportation owns part of that, or there's something with the bridge, and because there's some hoops to jump through. Am I right, Roger?
Yes, the issue there is, well, we're more than happy to maintain the dinghy dock. FDOT thought it was actually attached to the seawall. It's not, it goes over the seawall. We had a series of meetings with all the players, including the town attorney from the state, state lands, FDOT, FDEP, and they've just recently understood what we said, that our dinghy dock goes over the seawall. It's not attached to the seawall. And the reason that's important is we don't want to become responsible for maintaining that seawall. Now that that's been resolved, we think that we're good to go in terms of continuing with the old dinghy dock while we're working on the additional dinghy dock, which we believe we will the one you were alluding to, Council Beach, which is one that we think we'll need for the additional capacity created by the mooring field expansion.
That one, if I'm correct, that was waiting for the mooring field to complete before we could apply for the,
Yes,
do that.
yes, it's a series of, unfortunately, successive actions versus concurrent actions.
so without result in another submerged land lease?
Well, no, no, I don't believe so. I think some permitting and stuff, but I believe that area is already in the town's riparian rights. So, other than regular permitting, there shouldn't be anything special there.
Questions about that part? Second item, the town, as you know, has taken over to be the actual provider of upland services as of October 1, so it's been a month. And the office is in the leased unit at Harbor House, which they're working on. I was there a month ago. I was there the day they opened, so I haven't been back, but they were trying to order some furniture and get different things set up, so I need to go back. There's one restroom facility in that. We're still leasing from Matanzas the 2 restroom shower facilities and the laundry facility from them. And so we're moving forward with us managing the services there. As I understand, there are 2 part-time employees that have 5-hour office hours each day. We're moving forward with getting a fob system to lock the restrooms so that each of the boaters would have a fob to open the shower facilities we have. And are there any questions about that?
Is that working out so far, Kathy?
Huh?
How's that working out so
So
far?
far, so good. I mean, we had our meeting about a week and a half ago, and so it was 20 days in, so I think so far, it'll be interesting to see how, going forward into season when we get more and more boaters. Right now, the office hours are 7 a.m. to noon. And so some of us have concerns that we should really be later in the day because that's when boaters come in. Like if I cruise and I'm coming from Venice, I'm not going to get here till 4 or 5 in the afternoon, and the office isn't open. So some of us have some concerns, and that's, in talking with staff, that's something they're going to be looking at as we go forward to see what needs to be adjusted with that kind of thing. So far, so good. So
Okay.
we are on the DACWA system, so people it's not really can't be a reservation. It's still first come, first served because of our land lease. We can't make reservations, but they're put like on a wait list, and then when they get here, they get a ball assignment and that kind of thing. So that's still going, they can do it online on their phones ahead of time. So that helps with not having to have a physical person in the office all the time.
Can they, let's just say the office isn't open, can they go online and find out which of balls are available and hook up to that ball and then take care of it the next day, or how does
Right
that?
now, what Austin said is that they're keeping ball 1 and ball 2 open for people that come in later in the day to take without having an assignment. And then the next day, they will have a permanent assignment. That's what they're doing right now to see. And again, it's a new system, so we're seeing how things work out, and we'll make adjustments as we go ahead.
Reasonable?
Is there a way to track, or does it do it now, track of when they actually check in, not when they try to get in, but
I
when they
think that's
actually
part
get
of the
in?
record keeping. DACWA will know, DACWA doesn't have that, I don't think, but I think the office staff will be tracking when they actually,
Interesting to know what the average time is that the most people come in.
okay. Well, it's my concern, having cruised a lot, that, if you're getting somewhere, you don't get somewhere between 7 a.m. and noon. Unless you're coming from, maybe coming from St. James City, you might. But anywhere else, it's going to be later in the day. So that is a concern that we have.
Kathy, just from the 10,000 foot level, for people who aren't in this world, this renting of the Harbor House, or Roger, what's the practical implication of doing that? Does that give us more room? Does it give the town the ability to take control of the operation with additional space for them? What's the practical impact of what we've done?
Well, when we took it over, before Matanzas did all of the paperwork and they had the office. So if the town was going to take it over, we needed to have an office. That's essentially what the unit at Harbor House is for us. One of my other points is later, and we can talk about that now, or that's the next point, is that we physically have not, even though we've taken over the operation, we have not expanded our shower facilities at all. And that's something we still need to do, because I don't know if the plan right now, we're renting the Harbor House unit, so I don't know if there's really any plan to build showers there too. That was one of the things we were looking at when we were looking at renting both or buying both of the Harbor House units, was then we would expand that. But
So by taking over that administrative role for Matanzas, that doesn't open up space at Matanzas for additional
not
bathrooms?
at all.
Okay, I'm
In
just
fact,
curious, yeah.
we're renting that space from them now. And that's a short-term thing.
Okay.
I don't know what our contract is, maybe 2 years with them.
Well, it's cancelable with notice.
Right.
So, the issue was that we were running out of time under the current arrangement. And by mutual consent, neither the town recommended to council nor Matanzas wanted to continue the current previous arrangement. So we entered into this hybrid arrangement to maintain services while we continue to look at it with the Anchorage Advisory Committee and try to figure out a future path.
Right.
So,
Because
thank you.
as we morph into the next point, which is continue to look for the upland facility, actually, we only have 2 restroom showers, which is really not enough for the 70 balls we have, and we're talking about expanding 19 more.
I guess you're answering my question. So this additional Harbor House space still is an interim solution. It is not a
Yes.
solution.
Yes.
All right, that's helpful. Thank you.
Because we're renting it. I guess we're renting it with the option to buy, but it is a transitional place.
Okay.
And we still need to be looking for somewhere to buy, to build our own facility.
Kathy?
Any other questions on that? And then that kind of goes into the next Virginia Avenue property. There was some looking at that, but that's not really an option for a facility. But part of our issue now as well is at Matanzas, we had the ability to dock the pump-out boat, which we have in the short term, but that is going away. And the Anchorage Advisory discussed at our last meeting, looking at the possibility of putting a dock at our Virginia Avenue property. Right now, there is not a seawall, I don't think, and there's no dock. But when we lose our dock at Matanzas, we have to find somewhere to dock the boat, or else we have to put it on the trailer every time, on and off the trailer every time we use it, which is a production. It's a good-sized boat. So we wanted the council to perhaps look at the feasibility of putting a dock at the Virginia property that the town owns.
It sounds to me like it would be a long-term solution. It would take a while to get the seawall built and the docks built and so forth and so on, and if there's any leases involved. Is there any way we can talk to other property owners about the possibility of tying up the boat for an interim period?
Yeah, we're continuing to explore alternatives it's really facilitating how the service is delivered. The services can get delivered no matter what.
Right.
Just how great an inconvenience it is or difficult it is for staff to provide the service. So that's what we're working on, to figure out a way to do that in a fashion where can minimize the effort that it takes to provide the service.
I'd like to say I'm in favor of us doing something with that property. We own waterfront property that we're not using. We have a boat we need to store. You don't have to build a seawall to have a dock and a lift. I've seen plenty of properties that have them. Though a seawall is not an impossible thing to do, but I think we should look at using our property to store our boat.
Yeah, I agree, no doubt about it, but in the interim, if there's a need in the interim, it takes time.
Well, you are correct, that's a long-term, but we would like to explore that, and Roger is right. There are a lot of short-term options to look at, and one of them is putting it in and out on the trailer every time. But there are other docks to explore in the short term. But we would like to explore this as a long-term option, since, as Rexanne said, that we do own the property.
Makes sense, makes sense.
Has Matanzas not shown interest of wanting to extend the ability to keep it there until a decision can be made?
No, and I understand why they don't, because they have a big business with people coming to their restaurant with boats.
It's such a nice.
And it's been nice to be able to have that, but I think they want that space for their customers.
With Roger, with the Virginia Avenue, I know we've had some discussions with someone about potentially swapping that land, or would this hinder or would that help in any way? Either way, I guess.
Well, it definitely would be a new wrinkle. Right now, where that situation lies is the adjacent property owner was going to, through his technical team, look for alternatives in terms of land that might be similar, that we could swap, although I have not heard from them in a while. But that was the last conversation we had, John and I had with their attorney, that they were going to hire an appraiser to evaluate the value of the Virginia Avenue land, and then using that as a basis of price, go look and see what they can find for that price. And then if they can't find something for the price, say, look, we think Virginia Avenue is worth X. Found this other property that's similarly suited, but they want Y. So we would put X to it. Does the town want to put Y? I mean, all of those types of things. So we're really in a waiting to hear back from them mode.
Staff put together a cost of what it would take to make that property user-friendly or ready for the use that the Anchorage Advisory Committee has had.
Right, well, it was our intention to put the discussion and decision to move forward with doing something Virginia Avenue in terms of a dock or lift or both, an M&P for future discussion, and not get into a committee report. But the answer is that at some point, it requires us to spend money to do engineering and other things for there or some other location.
Would you spend 1 second, Madam Vice Mayor or Roger or Kathy, just for us who don't know, how do we own land on Virginia Avenue? What's the history behind that, just out of curiosity?
Okay, technically, I believe it's technically.
One in the card game.
It's one of these situations where it was like dedicated unimproved right away.
Part of the plat. Not uncommon for governments to come into possession or have the right of use. So there's a very important distinction that carries with it a very important distinction, which is right of use versus ownership. And the right of use is in the form of essentially an easement. Generally, it derives from the recording of a plat and acceptance of that plat. However, generally speaking, under Florida law, your use of that platted area is for whatever purpose is provided for on the face of the plat. So if the plat says that it's to be used for right-of-way purposes, that's the limitation.
We have right of use, not ownership. Is that correct?
That's correct.
It's helpful. Thank you.
You know how it's written on this plat for that property?
I don't recall off the top of my head. I know that I've looked at it. I think that there are some issues there, but we're working with the property owner on Virginia to potentially overcome some of those issues.
So, in your opinion, is constructing a dock there part of the permitted uses?
I think that I previously said when that came up a couple months back, I don't believe so.
The Anchorage Advisory Committee was asking the council to authorize that the staff look at this and answer all these questions.
I recall that part of the answer, very specifically, is that to the extent that this was going to have a facility, an upland facility, because that was one of the other things that was discussed, I reminded the council that it had just recently adopted a resolution stating that other water access points or other properties that that the city owned, particularly in residentially zoned districts, would not be used for bathroom facilities. That resolution still exists.
And we're not asking to build a bathroom there.
Well, no. My recollection, it was part of the issues that we were asked to look at was potentially used not only for docks, but for an upland facility at the time.
Right.
And that was, an upland facility would necessarily include bathrooms.
Anything else? Okay, Kathy, continue.
Okay. Because we've had a lot of changes, obviously, with the town taking over the services and whatnot, we're going to be working over the next few months with looking at amending the management plan that we have, and also with our strategic plan, because a lot of things have changed. So that's one of the things that we're going to be working on as a committee over the next few months. One of the things I was asked to bring up today was Cruisers Appreciation Day, which we hosted for 12 years in conjunction with Matanzas, as they were our provider. We haven't had it the last couple of years. That's our spring event that we've had to thank our mooring. And we haven't had it because of COVID. In our budget request, you provided us with to have funds for this event, and we would like to host it. It would be a very changed event since we no longer partner with Matanzas, but I was told to ask if you would be in favor of us hosting that again.
Not. Any objection?
I'm in favor of it.
Yeah.
We're going to work towards it. We kind of split all of the food and beverages. We gave tickets out to the Mooringfield patrons, a certain number of tickets that they could get some food and drink, and we'll have to kind of work through and decide how we're going to do it differently since we don't have Matanzas as a partner, but there's lots of different options, so we'll be kind of looking at that. And looking to host it, it's traditionally been late March, early April. Maybe we'll look to have it a little earlier. One of the complaints was Matanzas wanted to have it later because they had part of their facility, and they would want to, in season, have that available for them. So, but that meant a lot of the boaters left. So, anyway, we'll be working on that. I'm glad that you're in favor of doing that again. My final thing was to just get a sense from you, and you don't necessarily have to do it today, but to think about what you want our committee to work on, what your priorities are for us to work on, to get a sense of what you would think is important for our committee to work on in the coming months and year. Maybe you have something.
It seems to me like you have a pretty good agenda here.
We have a few things to work on, but certainly we would like to get some guidance from you as we're going forward with what's coming up in the mooring field.
Good. Well, give us a little time to gnaw on that, and we'll come up with something for you. Any other questions for Kathy? We sure appreciate your report, Kathy, and all the hard work that you continue to do for the group down there, and
Thanks for having me.
look forward to all your progress. Thanks. Okay. The next item is the approval of the minutes for the October 18th, 2021 Town Council meeting. Is there a motion to approve the minutes? Change or amend or?
Move to approve the minutes.
Second.
Move and second it. Any discussion? Objection? Motion carries unanimously. Next item is a public hearing for the prohibition of non-marine biodegradable straws. This is an ordinance of the Town of Fort Myers Beach, Florida, amending Article 6 of Chapter 14 of the Code of Ordinances of the Town of Fort Myers Beach, entitled Prohibition of Plastic Straws, to prohibit the distribution of non-marine biodegradable straws, providing for codification, severability, Scrivener errors, conflicts of law, and an effective date. This is the second reading, and it's up for final adoption. So we'll open up.
Yeah,
the public
Mr. Mayor, this has been properly noticed, so therefore it is before you properly for second reading and adoption. We've gone through staff some modifications to the ordinance that is before you here this morning. The major change between first and second reading, based upon the comments of the actually service providers, was inserting a marine to the definition of biodegradable. Have any questions, we're here to answer them.
John, what is the effective date of this resolution before us today?
As it's written, would be
Option.
adoption, but we can modify that if that is, I think the last time was a 90-day window.
Yes.
We can put in the same language to this ordinance if that is your desire.
Just a suggestion, just in case folks have inventories they're trying to use up. I mean, it's pretty, I know this has been before us for a few weeks, but it's kind of abrupt not to give any time for transition, but I'm just throwing that out there for food for thought.
Actually, what we're doing is expanding what they can use, not pulling back in.
I think we determined last time that isn't exactly the case. We're redefining it in ways that folks that may be using particular straws, those straws may no longer be eligible again, if I remember the debate correctly. Maybe I'm wrong, but I seemed like that they were actually potentially excluding some, which is not necessarily a bad thing. I just wanted to make sure we had enough time for people to implement.
Actually, the Vice Mayor is correct. Right now, the prohibition, the way it's implemented, is that the only type of straw that is currently allowed in Fort Myers Beach are paper straws. The proposal to do is to widen the type of straws to include a less narrow, but expanded type of hybrid straw that is has plastic components that is otherwise prohibited, as long as that's biodegradable, marine biodegradable.
So there's no straw currently being used on the island today, John, legally, that's appropriately, that fits under the ordinance, that would be banned with this revision. Is that your understanding?
That is correct.
Okay, then I'm fine with the effective date.
I have a question, as I asked before about the marine part of it. They said that it's not required for it to be labeled on the packaging that it's marine biodegradable. What's going to be the process of the town? Should someone get a violation or a warning that they're not using the correct straws? Is it they just have to provide the information to the town? Can they be proactive and do it ahead of time? So these are the straws we're choosing to use. Here's the specifications on it, so that it will help staff as well as the business owner?
Yes, because from a practical standpoint, it's the system is complaint driven, and therefore we would then investigate, make contact with that particular business, inform them of what is permissible, what is prohibited, look at what they're using, and see from a standpoint of the contents of what the makeup of the straw, if it meets the definition of marine biodegradable, and if not, then inform them what is acceptable. Obviously, the default is the paper straw, and go from there.
Anything else? Any other discussion? If not, is there a motion to approve?
Public comment.
Public hearing.
Oh, excuse me, I'm sorry. I want to X out the public here. Yes, sir, come on up. Good morning.
Mr. Mayor, Mr.
Good to
Vice
see you
Mayor,
again.
City Council meeting members. You answered most of what I was going to try to clarify for the group today, so thank you for doing all that ahead of time. The one clarification, Mr. Allers, we actually surveyed 2 of our competitors, and they are advertising marine biodegradable on their products on the actual packaging themselves. So we believe both on the proactive side with this ordinance, providing the definition to your businesses, what is the testing methodology, et cetera, will allow kind of the proactive approach to adopting the product, as well as the indication or the advertising on the product itself from us as FADE, as well as our competitors, is happening.
So I had a business owner asking me a question that I didn't know the answer to. It makes sense to me. We talk a lot about the straws, but we don't talk about the paper that's covering the straw. Is that also got to be marine biodegradable?
Yes, per this ordinance, yes. The wrapping, what we found in Fort Myers Beach is we found some paper straws that had polypropylene or polyethylene wrapping on them. So the environmental project manager has included that in the ordinance. Not only the straw has to be marine biodegradable, as well as the wrapping.
Thank you.
So much for coming out again.
Thank you. Appreciate it. I love it here.
Okay, anyone else from the public wish to comment? Seeing none, we'll close the public comment. Now I will bring it back to the council. And is there a motion to approve ordinance 21-06, which is the prohibition of non-marine biodegradable straws?
I'll make a motion. Do I have to read the ordinance, John?
That's already been
Read.
I'll make a motion to approve the.
Second, the motion to approve ordinance 2106.
It's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion?
I would just add one thing, and this is kind of to Councilman Adderholt's, is that since we're dealing with a change, effective date becomes a little fuzzy because people want to burn through inventory, but other people want to adopt early. Or wonder if we just make a decision that the town's policy standpoint, just be flexible over a period of time until people can either work through their inventory, or if they want to adopt early, can adopt early.
They can still use the paper if they want to.
Unless they have a coating that's not marine biodegradable.
I've never known our staff to be that technical with.
Just to put the business people at ease.
Sure.
Anyway, that's just a suggestion.
Everyone else okay with that? Is there any objection to that? No. Okay. We'll include that in there. Any other discussion? Hearing none, we'll put it to a roll call vote. Councilman Veach.
Aye.
Councilman Adderhold.
Aye.
Mayor Murphy. Aye. Vice Mayor Husfuss.
Aye.
Councilman Allers.
Aye.
Ordinance carries unanimously. Okay, we'll move on to the next item, which is ordinance 21-07. This is a commercial boulevard zoning district. This is an ordinance of the town of Fort Myers Beach, Florida, amending the town of Fort Myers Beach Land Development Code, Division 5, sections 34 through 701, -701 through 34-707 CB zoning district to clarify what constitutes an existing use and how and when that existing use can be continued or modified. Allow the continuation of existing uses, providing for severability, codification, scrivener's errors, conflicts of law, and an effective date. This is the first public hearing, assuming this gets moved on with the second reading and a final adoption on November 15th, 2021 at 9 a.m. Open up the discussion.
Good morning, members of Town Council. Sarah Probst with Community Development. This morning, I'm presenting to you recommended language to amend the CB zoning district District is considered a redevelopment district, and the language currently limits the allowed uses to the category of use or less intense use than what is immediately preceding in a specific unit. A restaurant is considered the most intense, a retail use is considered less intense than that, and then an office use is the least intense. For example, if a restaurant is in Unit A of a strip center, the next use in the unit can be a restaurant, a retail use, or an office. However, if a retail use goes into there, only a retail or office use can go in. Following that, if an office use goes in, only office uses can be in there. So proposed new language would create, well, the other option is to increase the intensity by using a plan development. Excuse me, I'm sorry. I'm struggling a little bit with a cold. The proposed new language would not create any new uses in the zoning district. It would, however, expand the area and time frame that applied to the previous use. Rather than looking at the immediately preceding uses within the specific unit to determine the allowed use. New use could be any of the uses that had existed on that parcel previously, not just the specific unit at any time. So let me explain this a little bit more clearly. So the way it's currently set up, you're limited to the specific use in the specific unit previously preceding the request to put in a use. The way this would work is if that use had existed on the entire parcel at any time previously, it could be used there. There also is additional language for a bank with a drive-through, which is an existing structure within the CB zoning district. While a financial institution is considered an office in the zoning ordinance, this use also has a drive-through, which changes the use and isn't exactly covered in the zoning ordinance. We would like to recommend that this be akin to a retail use for intensity purposes. Expansion of the area and time does not apply to bars or cocktail lounges. Those are still considered as very specific uses in the ordinance. Other language that has been included is strike through and underline that would clarify the meaning and correct some of the code references. And we've added some allowances for outdoor dining and outdoor display where they currently exist. This wouldn't expand it, it would just allow it to continue if it's currently there. I'm also available for any questions you may have.
Sarah, questions for Sarah?
This is, I think this goes way back to, I think even when I was sitting on the LPA. Is this, we discussed this with Jason and maybe yourself, is this primarily to address the situation, the unique situation with the bank at Seagrave Plaza? Is this to try to address that anomaly, or is it broader than that?
It's broader than that. As for my time working here, there were quite a few uses that had previously been in these, in a variety of units. I mean, CB isn't as large as the downtown district, but there are quite a few areas within the CB zoning district. And essentially, over time, they've been continually downgraded in intensity. So, because if you had a restaurant and then it turned into a retail use or an office use, it has to remain that less intense use. So if anybody ever moves into a space, utilizes it for a less intense use, essentially it's downgraded to that in perpetuity unless they go through the rezoning to PD.
Is what you're proposing today, or is what's before us today, is that pretty common in communities surrounding Fort Myers Beach?
I couldn't speak to that necessarily. I can say that the redevelopment district, the way this one is written, is fairly uncommon. I've never seen one that continually downgrades. Typically, you have a set of uses.
The changes that we're making, will it make it more uniform with communities around us?
Yes.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor and members of council. I wasn't here clearly at the time that this was put in place, but my assumption was, in looking at this issue, that this was sort of a gentle way to reduce intensity over time. So if you're in there, you're fine. You stay in there, you leave. Someone like you can go in there, but if someone different who's less intense goes in there and stays there for a period of time, you now have that less intensity. That becomes the new, hit space. The concern that you might want to think about as you deliberate over this item is this. That if you don't allow the use of a particular unit to go back to a higher use, that's something you may think is in the best interest of town. What you have to be careful about is allowing all units to go to the highest possible use. Then you will be increasing intensity significantly. Because then theoretically, every lot in the shopping center could be a restaurant.
You're using the word intensity, not density, correct?
Yeah, for commercial, it's intensity. Residential is density. It's typically utilized, I believe, right? So, but the concept is the same. They're used interchangeably. So that's where you need to be thoughtful. Two thresholds. One is, should a particular unit be able to go back to a higher use if it had it historically? In that unit 22. Moreover, could unit 22 then become the highest use in the entire shopping center? Or it's only limited to the highest use of unit 22?
Roger, the way it's drafted today, does it address your concern?
Well, I think it's written on a more liberal standpoint as I look through it this weekend, but can you comment on that?
Yes, the way that it is written, it would be any uses that had previously been on that parcel. So it wouldn't be just that specific unit.
Well, does that mean like if it's a shopping center, that everybody could use the maximum use that was allowed anywhere in that shopping center?
Yes, that is the way that it is currently written. There may be other codes that would come into play that would limit the ability to do that, such as parking. Every unit in there couldn't become a restaurant because parking would become an issue. So there would potentially be some limiting factors there.
That was going to be my next question. So if we have a mall and there's an office and there's a retail and there's a restaurant or a bar, and they all go to a restaurant. Now, when someone signs a lease with somebody who's going to make it into a restaurant, they need to get permitting, and that permitting has to show adequate parking.
Well, hang on a second. Sign a lease? No. To get a certificate of use, yes.
Yes.
So I can tell you that I've personally been involved, not necessarily here, but in other places. People have signed leases, things, and then the overall development exceeded the parking limit or some other criteria that existed. The restaurant is perhaps an extreme example only because to create a restaurant out of a space that wasn't a restaurant is very expensive because of putting requirements, fire safety requirements, and other things. It makes it a very expensive proposition. But it's not necessarily a restaurant. It could be something that's, I don't know, tax office or attorney office that becomes a hair salon. It's more intense. So what you have to really think about is if parcel 22, whatever the history of use is on that property, whether you want to limit its future uses to what's there over from birth to that point in time, okay, pretty much anything that has ever been there, or say anything on the adjacent units can also be put there. That's where you start getting the potential expansion of intensity.
Sarah, could you tell me if there are other parts of the island that are CB zoning district besides Seagrape?
Yes, there actually are several, and I don't believe that I've printed off my zoning map.
Just what you happen to remember is fine. You don't have to be complete, but
There's a unit next to Lover's Lane. It's a fairly large building there. That is CB.
Office building.
Looks like an office building.
I think where we are now and the fire station lot is CB. There's Junkanoo property. That's CB. The area down by where the other bank is, I think the adjacent property to CB. It's scattered all up and down the island.
There's also a unit that was once a medical building down south on the island.
It hasn't sold for forever, and I understand people have looked into it and not purchased it because they can't do anything with it. But all retail in the island is not in the CB district, just for clarity, correct?
No, that's
This isn't going to affect everybody, it's just those certain parcels.
Yes, Santini and downtown also allow restaurants.
Right, but they're not part of the CB.
No.
I have a, sorry. I was just going to say that, from a, sort of stepping up the zoning without going to the maximum zoning would be, as I said earlier, to allow any use that was in that unit. And then if you want to really widen the universe, then you could say any use within the property.
I'm sorry, Dan, I know you had a thought, but I'm kind of continuing with this. So just for my clarity, we have a restriction currently on CB that doesn't exist for the other retail parts of the island. They can already do this. Is that correct?
That's correct,
So
yes.
we're not doing something wildly outlandish here.
No, you're not.
We're
It's
taking
just
off a
really a
restriction.
question. Well, yeah, it's a question of how much you want to loosen
Right.
the scope. You want to loosen it to the max, that's the way the item is written. You want to loosen it to slightly less than the max, that's the point I was making earlier.
I think that, and also when you talk about the effect, and I don't know the history of these properties. I don't know if this means that, half of the CB can now be a restaurant, or whether that's a good or a bad thing. Because because it really depends. You have to go back and look at everybody who's occupied these properties for the last 20 years. The effect could be that we are making a pretty significant liberalization of our zoning. We can get a lot more intensity almost immediately.
Yes, I just don't see that happening because anybody with any kind of business plan, if there's a plaza that's already got 3 restaurants in it and it's a small plaza, they're not going to put in a 5th or 6th restaurant because they already see there are restaurants there. I just don't see it as likely happening.
Most landlords probably would not. Some would.
Well,
but-
not just landlords,
Yeah.
the business owners themselves should be coming in with a business plan and
allowing it.
I think there are other factors besides this that determine what's going to go in a particular spot. We aren't the only thing that controls the situation.
Clearly, there's market and other conditions. So, I understand the example you're giving, and then, you also then have on the other extreme, which is, I always want to own a restaurant and I can get in here and it's a rent that I can afford, or I always want to own a barber shop and there's a rent I can get into and afford, and therefore I'm going to do it, and maybe that's, maybe they're not really looking at potential competition. I don't know what's going through their mind.
But she already mentioned parking can be an issue. If there's not enough parking, then that is going to be a restriction
I
on the
understand,
situation.
so just so everyone understands what that means, is that every time there's a change, and particularly if it appears to be an upward change, we're going to have to go back and recalculate the parking use on the property to see if then we can do, but it's just going to take time.
Well, I think that's something that we need to be doing. Parking is such an issue. That's one of the things we do need to keep an eye on. It makes sense to me that we would keep that in place. That would help the situation.
Another way to approach this, instead of opening up, the Pandora's box and saying that any use has been done over the last 20 years, we could just start it from now, or an effective date, so that no longer diminishing the intensity when they change use. Where we are now is a starting point instead of 20 years ago.
Then that doesn't solve the Wells Fargo problem.
And again, are we writing an ordinance for one specific?
No. But the Wells Fargo problem is demonstrative of several other problems on the island. The medical center has been empty and vacant for years because I actually know of a restaurant who wanted to go in there and gave up on that plan to try to do so. It's a perfect place to have a restaurant. There's plenty of parking, nothing else around it. We're unreasonably restricting.
Madam Vice Mayor, I'm inclined to agree with you. Could you help me, or maybe the mayor, folks, or Roger, how is it that certain areas got in the CB district and certain areas didn't? Was Was there a
That would be
method to the
something to
madness?
ask our mayor who was here at the
Just a
time.
little history here so we could better understand what we're up against here.
Sarah could probably explain it better than I.
My understanding, the intent of this was not to be the zoning ordinance forever. It was intended to be a redevelopment district in the interim, and then there was going to be additional zoning passed. It doesn't sound as if that ever happened, and I don't know why that occurred. I'm not sure of the history of why it sort of stopped at that point. But that's my understanding of the situation, that it was intended to be redeveloped in the future as something else, and that didn't occur.
Individual parcels could come in for rezoning.
Yes, that's correct. And that's the way this code is written. I think the intent was really that this was going to drive businesses to do PDs, to do plan developments for their properties and redevelop. It just never got to there. And with so many existing buildings with infrastructure, it's difficult to push that to happen.
It kind of comes, this whole thing with the bank, and I kind of read the notes on the LPA, and it sounds like that, the use of this is, I guess, classified as an office, and they signed when they bought it, there was a rule they couldn't operate another bank there, non-compete from the sellers of the other bank. So there was, it sounds to me, either wishing to get it repurposed or just lack of kind of due diligence to this. But there's this section 4 here, conversion of an existing space previously used as a financial institution with drive-through to retail with small outdoor display, which sounds very specific to this one project. Put in an ordinance, it seems to me that there is the PD avenue, that if people want to change that, there is a process to do that. They are not restricted to have options. Without this ordinance, they have options.
Which kind of leads me to the question that I was going to ask earlier, Sarah. That number 4 that Councilor Veach was just talking about, it does seem very specific to one particular business, well, potentially, possibly two. Where my concern comes in is where it says with small outdoor displays. Is that going to have any effect on some of the other businesses that aren't in this zoning district? With what they are allowed to have out there for displays? There's businesses on the north end, south end that have little areas that they could put out, and they're restricted to what they can have out there. This just seems very vague to me. Can they fill up the entire space? What describes small?
I can say that it won't affect other businesses because it is specifically in this zoning district. It could affect other businesses. It won't affect anything outside of this zoning district.
I guess my question is more, if this goes through as it's proposed, could potential other businesses outside of that zoning district come in and say, they have this many square footage of outdoor display, why can't I have more?
I mean, they could certainly request that change be made to the ordinance. It wouldn't be anything that could be made without a council decision. But if they felt that they were being treated unfairly by this change in the code, they could request that this be looked at and addressed in a different zoning district.
Is there a way that this can be worded so that it's not so specific to just 2 properties on the island, or what I think are 2 properties on the island? Going along with what Councilor Veach said, it appears, if I'm just reading this from an outside looking in, it appears as though they're getting a rezoning without having to go through the process.
There may be other ways to address this, and I'm certainly open to options on how this could be worded differently. One of the reasons that we had to address this specifically is because of the code definitions. So the code definitions actually list financial institution as an office, general, or medical. Then, however, later in that same definition, it says the following types of establishments are not considered to be offices for the purposes of this chapter. And then it says automobile rental drive-throughs. But it doesn't address drive-throughs for financial institutions, and it doesn't address drive-throughs of any other type. So it specifically leaves out how this is addressed, although it clearly determines that it's different because it has a drive-through.
Which,
yeah, and I'm sure that was written for a very specific reason. I mean, how many automobile rental drive-throughs do you know of? I think that the reason that we had to address this so specifically is because it is a very different instance for the island. I mean, it's not different in general, but for this island, we don't have very many of this type of use, and the code doesn't reference very well.
I guess I would feel more comfortable if it was more specific as far as what the definition of small is. Does that mean they can use the entire outside space that is now a drive-through, or can they expand it? There's really no definition as far as, it's very vague to me.
And I would have to look back at the code to determine if there is a definition of small. Is there?
I'd love to hear it. I know that there's something that refers to the size of the outdoor space, but if it's in a different zoning district, is it different or is it the same for the entire island?
Would Ms. Grady be able to tell you the code reference that she has? Because I don't have it in front of me.
You'll have a chance here.
Okay.
So we're going to get further educated by.
Okay, so I don't have that specific information, but it sounds as if it may exist.
Other questions?
Just real quick,
Go ahead,
Sarah,
go ahead.
was there a vote on the from the LP on this particular resolution?
Yes, all voted in favor.
Thank you.
Sarah. Okay, Beverly Grady.
Morning, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. For the record, Beverly Grady of Retzel and Anderson. I'm representing Robert Himmelstein, and his LLC does own 2815 Estero Boulevard, which is the former Wells Fargo site. Let me answer your question first, which is under the definition section in the code, there's a definition of retail large, retail small, has to do with the size of the building. So retail small has to be less than 5,000 square feet. Retail large can exceed that 5,000 square feet. So there is a defined term that applies in all commercial.
That's outdoor space.
No. That's just retail small is the building. Now, I'll go into why we, let me give a little bit of background, because as well as the mayor, I was also here and at the time of the incorporation and the initial regulation. So I think it's important, and I do have a letter in the file that's part of your packet that went to the LPA. But once the town was incorporated, the Lee Plan and the Lee County Land Development Code were effect in the town of Fort Myers Beach until this council changed that. So there were some early on ordinances that got to some of the more issues of concern. And one was the commercial zoning in Fort Myers Beach. So when you looked at these parcels that are CB today, they were formerly an old Lee County commercial zoning. There were 3 of them. They had a lot of commercial uses. They had residential uses. So the council in 1997 adopted an ordinance to kind of freeze those uses as they existed, and no more development orders unless you went through the plan development and rezoned it. But in that ordinance, and I attached it, and I attached the Bill Spakowski memo, who was your outside planner at the time, this was an interim reaction. This was to freeze this so you could deal later with what would be appropriate uses in the CB zoning district. After that 1997 ordinance, you of course adopted your own comprehensive plan in 99, and then you worked on the land development code. And that was literally years of work on the land development code where numerous issues were addressed and worked through. But I would say as to this ordinance of these parcels, they were rezoned CB, and that issue was still pushed down the road because the language in the CB basically locks you into whatever your existing use is. So, to me, I think we're here with the law of unintended consequences. There was a reaction to make sure a lot of commercial wasn't developed, but it never that you a zoning district that really is the most limiting zoning district, and that's had consequences. So you now have properties that can't be used that are properties that merit and would be good for the town of Fort Myers Beach if they were back in valuable use. So Mr. Himmelstein started meeting with staff when he was considering this purchase around March of this year. And I will say he didn't have total understanding of what CB meant, but he understood that there was an ordinance and work in process, and that staff was recognizing that the town had recognized there is an issue with CB zoning. So he purchased it in May, and then I think he's been contacting staff. I know he's contacted Carl, met with Carl, and where's the ordinance? So when the ordinance came out in October and we reviewed it, we still thought there were interpretation issues. And one of them, you have a change now that you can go back on this parcel. And it's an interpretation issue will be coming up. And any use that had been on this parcel, then it does recapture that. And that's what the town manager was speaking to. And Sarah has brought out the issue with financial institutions with drive-through. They're really not dealt with in your code. I mean, if you look at permitted uses, it doesn't list financial institution and it doesn't deal with drive-through. This particular site had 5 drive-throughs, and it's a 2,600 square foot building. So when we looked at that ordinance and we knew that staff intended to include a remedy for this parcel, we thought the most conservative way was to actually craft language that was very clear. So we didn't have to go through interpretation of what is a financial institution with retail. I mean, with drive-through, is that retail? And that was the issue Sarah brought up. It wasn't clear in the ordinance. So we drafted the additional language that clearly said, if you're an existing financial institution with drive-through, then that can be considered retail. Now, you're limited to retail small. Now, this is a sizable piece of property, and as the backup, it's also in your packet, I included the survey, the square footage of the property. You can see the amount of parking that is located on this site. So what the owner was looking for, Mr. Himmelstein, he wants to do design services and furniture sales. He's going to put the indoor furniture on the inside. It's only a 2,600 square foot. So like have a bedroom set, a dining room set, a living room set, and you work with his design services. And the outside, he was looking for outdoor display of outside furniture, patio furniture. So that's why we requested what we did. I would urge you to, and I think this may be a first step in the CB zoning, because I still see future interpretation issues for the other CB districts, but it does only permit those CB districts, and there are a finite number of them, would permit them with this ordinance under the general language to have their existing use as well as any use that existed on this parcel. Because the financial institution wasn't dealt with, we just put it in a clear provision. We want to use this parcel as retail. It's across from the library. It actually has a shopping center behind it, Sea Grape, along Lover's Lane. And it's on Estero Boulevard. So we just gave that backup information as this is an appropriate use to be recognized in the CB zoning district. And council will know better than I, but we didn't come up with any other, but I think I heard today there's maybe one other financial institution that's in the CB zoning district. So the way that language is worded, yes, it's only going to affect a financial zoning institution with drive-through that would be able to then do retail small as defined in the land development code. The property, so Mr. Himmelstein did do due diligence. He has met with the staff before and after purchasing. He has been advised, the recognition by staff, that what he's proposing is a reasonable use for that location, that site, and that the town of Fort Myers Beach recognizes there's an issue with this CB zoning district, and an ordinance was being presented that would then provide reasonable use to this property. So, another alternative, as you've mentioned, is rezoning. I mean, rezoning in the town of Fort Myers Beach is a commitment of thousands of dollars, as well as the time that it takes, which can be 8 months, it can be a year. It takes a lot of time, and I would just respectfully request, when you look at what we're requesting, there's no real reason for that, because the staff and the LPA have looked at this from this and find this to be an acceptable change, recognizing what it would permit in this property. So we would urge you to revise the CB zoning district, and that this would be a good first step.
Really, thank you for that. That was very detailed as always and enlightening. I'm for doing something with the properties. I don't like to see them sit there empty. My only concern is with the outdoor space issue. Because this is really, this line is only going to really affect two locations on the island. There's a lot of outdoor space there. There's really nothing here saying that they couldn't technically fill up that entire parking lot full of outdoor furniture. And I just see a problem down the road with other businesses that are restricted with what they can have outside their retail business, having an issue and coming back before, and then we're doing this all over again. So that's the part of that one added line, and I'm not opposed to it. I just would like to see a little better definition as to the outdoor space that would be provided. I just don't want that whole parking lot to be full of patio tables.
Okay.
But we have parking lot regulations. You have to have open parking spaces for cars. We don't currently permit in any way, shape, or form that you can put an outdoor display in the parking lot.
Correct, but the Wells Fargo property that we're discussing specifically about this number 4 item, where they're talking about having outdoor spaces, not parking. That's
You
a
just
drive-through
said,
area.
I don't want to see outdoor furniture filling the parking lot, and that's not possible,
Well,
is
I will
all I'm
rephrase
saying.
it.
Okay.
The drive-through area that's paved to the south side of Wells Fargo, the way this is written, could technically be filled completely up with outdoor patio furniture.
I don't think so, but
Well, what in there tells you that you can't?
They have like 34 parking spots. And how many parking spots do they need for 2,500 square feet of retail?
but what I'm saying, our current code does not allow you to put furniture in a parking space. So that's all I wanted to make clear, that you couldn't fill a parking lot with patio furniture. That's all I'm saying. I understand if Dan has concerns about the drive-through area,
Thank
but
you
you
for-
can't fill a parking lot with patio furniture.
Fair enough. I'm referring to the area that you drive up underneath the awning to be able to withdraw cash from the bank, not the parking to the north side of the building. The actual area that's paved under, just past Lover's Lane.
Right, and I will say, I mean, that's already roofed, so that was the intended use, was under the roofed areas where you would have the outdoor patio.
And I understand that, but that's not defined in here. Maybe if that's a language that needs to be added, under the roofed area, I mean, if they're okay, that, at least you have an idea, and that outside space is not just gonna be filled with whatever they wanna fill it with. That's my only issue with that number 4, is that there's no definition of what outdoor space is.
And this is first reading, so we could definitely come up with language
that's-
that I think, because he actually has a plan how he wants to actually design the outside, and we don't have any problem limiting that.
There's decking involved and so forth and so on. There's decking involved around
Right.
the building and so forth. Yeah.
It
Any
does
other
seem like
questions?
the more specific we're getting, the less to me it belongs in an ordinance and more it belongs in a PD.
Beverly, could you comment on that? We've discussed this medical building on the south end that has some challenges. Could you discuss a little bit how it could benefit some other CB areas aside from the bank?
Okay, so when I look at the proposed changes by the staff, the change that they have under section 3A is you can convert office, retail, or restaurant to that use that previously existed on the parcel. So the first thing any parcel is going to do is go back and look at their history. So I don't know the medical parcel, and I don't know if staff has looked at that to say, do you consider medical just office, or can that be retail? Because whatever use existed on that parcel, under this new ordinance, they would get the benefit of that.
I believe when you read a section about the financial institution, there's a mention of a bank in that description.
Financial institution,
You were reading a section about, I think it was defining what office was, and I think you mentioned
Sarah,
a medical office.
I think Ms. Grady's concern, though, is this is a bank that had a drive-through, and she was concerned that the drive-through issue was going to cloud the interpretation of this. So she's trying to make sure that that doesn't cause a problem. It's not just that it was a financial institution or a bank. It had a drive-through aspect, and our code has other references to drive-through, so she didn't want to.
I understand that, but we were talking about the old medical building, because when Ms. Grady commented about when they came up with the CB district, there was kind of, the law of unintended consequences. We're then going down a different road with more unintended consequences. Is what has this medical building been? If it's only been a medical building, and the change in the law won't be able to
We're
put a restaurant.
making our code to look more like a typical code. Our code was uniquely restrictive. And that unique restriction was intended to be temporary at the time it was done. If you compare our code with other codes, I've never seen this anywhere. This restriction is, like I said, unique.
I can tell you who you can thank for that, but that's another discussion.
Well, it's important to look at the potential consequences. Now, I understand with the sale of this bank, and I don't know what the status of the other bank is, they put a clause in the sale agreement saying you cannot operate it as a bank. So they not only left the island, but they closed the door behind them.
No banks are coming to the island anyway.
But now
Banks
we're
are a
also
dying
talking-
breed, so
Like, again, Vice Mayor, I'm just pointing to, it's important to look at what the consequence of something you're looking at passing. What are the potential consequences? Let's look at it. Now,
what
let
I'm
me
trying to
finish.
do is-
Excuse me, I have the floor. So, we're talking about, okay, a medical facility that's closed, we put another restaurant in. We got a bank that closed, and we put another retail in. Is that what our island's gonna become, that one-dimensional? We're not gonna have the usual services, we're just gonna be retail and restaurants? Is that, are we driving it towards that view of our island?
what I'm trying to do is reassure you that what we're doing is not bizarre or crazy or opening up the floodgates. What we're doing is making our code look more like the rest of the normal world. Our code was uniquely restrictive, easily restrictive.
I understand that, but what I'm saying is by going back, and I'm not, I think that I like the idea of, conceptually of small restaurants and retail through the island makes it more walkable. I think there's some benefit to it. But I just have concerns, and I'm not saying necessarily objections, that since we're making this retroactive, we're going back to what these buildings were for the last 20 years, and we're even in our conversation, we don't know what those were. We don't know what this medical building was. We have an idea for the bank because it was a purpose-built building. So we don't really know what the consequence of passing this are.
Oh,
I think
That's
you
not
do
this-
know what the consequences are because you can look at all the other towns and cities that have a code that's more like this. Chaos has not
that doesn't-
broken out
that
in
doesn't
those
pre-
communities.
That doesn't preclude them from coming back for a,
That's the mechanism that was laid out in the CB zoning district, is that if you want more density, you're allowed. There is a way to do it. Now, as Ms. Grady said, it's more expensive and time consuming, but, I look at this, particularly this bank property, and I understand maybe the business he wants to put in retail and he owns it, his right is he has not the right to say what to put in there, but with a building where that is, with all the parking they have, they could, if they went for a CBD, they could probably come with something more intense and perfectly valid with that specific building. But the CB code all up and down the beach, I have no idea what a lot of those were.
I just appreciate the desire to flesh out what the consequences are, but I would argue that these are potentially intended consequences. We have vacant buildings that this little tree could potentially be developed and have occupancy that could help the island thrive. A vacant building, I would argue, adds no value to our island and in fact could be problematic in certain areas, particularly for there's all kinds of potential criminal activity that could occur in areas that don't have activity. It causes blight. And like you had said, Councilor Veach, so walkability, to be able to walk over. And I mean, most of the people on the island have patio furniture to be able to walk over to a particular facility on the island and do your shopping, have it delivered later. I mean, I think that adds value to our community. I appreciate your need to be concerned about unintended consequences, but I would argue this is a potentially intended consequence when sent development in areas that have been vacant for some time now.
I agree with what you're saying, Councilor Adderholt, but I also agree with what Councilor Ricci is saying. When I'm thinking of the consequences, I'm thinking about, today we've specifically identified one property. Nobody seems to know what the medical place is at the south end of the island. So a consequence could be by passing the way that this is, are we limiting what they're going to do, or they're going to have to go back through it? Right now, they're going to be able to go through, if this passes, without having to go through rezoning. Someone that potentially wants to buy and fill in that area, and I agree with you, an empty building does us no good. Are we potentially creating a consequence for someone that may or may not want to buy that office building or the medical building on the south end, and now they are restricted to what we've just passed through. We have to go through and do this all over again. So when I think of the consequences, that's what I'm looking at. I would like to know by the next reading what there's not a lot of properties. If staff can look at these other properties and potentially see something that they are going to be restricted from being able to open a business, whether it's a restaurant, whether it's something based on what we're potentially going to pass today. I'd like to see some of that added in the second reading, just to address what some of those potential consequences could be for future owners of that property.
And Dan, I'll link on to that. One of the things I have in my notes was I was going to ask Sarah to include in the next reading a list of the other properties that are, I'd already asked regarding that. So I would agree with your request.
One item that I would like to point out is we recognize the shortcomings of this ordinance. We're trying to address several immediate issues, but the comprehensive plan update will allow additional changes to this code. One of the issues that we have with the CB zoning is it's mostly within a specific future land use district that has very specific languages that is essentially then codified in the LDC. So once changes are made to the comprehensive plan that allows this zoning district to be used more like a regular zoning district, additional changes could be made to accommodate some of your requests. At this time, the way that the comprehensive plan is written, it really limits our ability to do too much with it. Specifically calls out that, well, it calls out a percentage of non-residential uses in that category. So that's one concern addressed there, is they can't go over a certain percentage of non-residential use within that category. But additionally, it says that landowners may seek commercial rezoning, but then doesn't allow other options for ways to rezone. So the comprehensive plan actually requires that this continually be downgraded in the same way that the land development code is. So this is an issue that's going to be addressed within the comprehensive plan update, and then additional changes could be made to accommodate potentially the medical building, things like that. We're aware of the issues, and we're just trying to work with what we currently have within the comprehensive plan.
Good.
Are you saying that these changes are not consistent with the comprehensive plan?
Current changes proposed are consistent with the comprehensive plan, but the comprehensive plan ties our hands in ways that we can address the additional changes. So one of the sections within the comprehensive plan, 4C3-4, says, in the boulevard category where mixed-use development, including some commercial uses, may be permissible, landowners may seek commercial rezoning only through the plan development process. Proposals must be sensitive to nearby residential uses, complement adjoining commercial uses, contribute to the public realm. So it goes on to explain how these potential commercial rezonings can occur, but then limits the ability to expand in any other way. So comprehensive plan ties our hands in some ways, and this code is written within that structure. However, knowing that we're planning to update the comprehensive plan and address some of these issues, potentially do more in the future. We recognize that it's not perfect and it doesn't get us all the way to where we would want to be, but it's sort of working within the structure that we have.
Okay. Thank you, Sarah. Okay, I'll open it up for public comment. Anybody from the public that wishes to comment to this? Hearing none, we'll close the public comment. I'll just tell you a little bit of history without the specifics of it, that when the town incorporated, of course, it was over a real estate issue, a rezoning issue. And once the council was seated, there was, I would say, very enthusiastic wish of the council, certain members of the council, to clamp down on any development whatsoever, which was borderline paranoia at the time. Well, so a lot of the earlier rules and regs that are still on the books here were a result of those early days. That's how it all came about. So now, sometimes it just takes one case like this to bring it to our attention that certain areas are still lacking, and that we can improve on, and that's why we're here today. And hopefully, we'll be able to work through this. So, with that being said, the staff and the attorneys can put their pencils to this and come up with some further suggestions, and we'll move this on to the November 15th, 2021 meeting at 9 a.m. with no objection.
Would you like a motion?
Okay.
I was going to move to schedule this for a hearing, second hearing and final adoption. That would be ordinance 21-07 on November 15th at 9 a.m. and that staff provide us with a list of other CB properties on the island and some history of their prior uses if possible.
The other, the outdoor size?
Yes.
Incorporate that.
I think Ms. Grady was probably going to take that on herself as a suggestion of drafting. I just wanted to have the motion include that we wanted to request that information from staff.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded.
One, and I don't know if this is worth a clarification or not, but, based on Councilman Aller's question, the way I read it, that line 4, it does kind of make it sound like it's retail with a small outdoor display as opposed to small retail building with an outdoor display. I don't know if that's just the place of the comma. It seems to me it can be interpreted either way.
I have every confidence that Ms. Brady will correct that. I do have a quick question for John. It's just a brief legal question. Is doing any of this, and again, I'm no lawyer, that's why I'm asking you, but does this open us up to any potential litigation about changing an ordinance on a property that's already been purchased?
No. If anything, it expands potentially the allowable uses than what is currently there. So,
okay. Perfect. Thank you.
Further discussion? Any objection to the motion? The Vice Mayor? Motion carries unanimously. Okay, next is the administrative agenda. Let's take a 5-minute break and we'll get back to this. Thank you. He's back. We'll call the meeting back to order at 10:36 and move on to the administrative agenda. The first item is Bayside Park improvements, ITB-21-16-PW. This is to approve and authorize the town manager to execute contract documents with Wright Construction for the Bayside Park improvements in the amount of not to exceed $885,346, including $44,267.30 contingency, and appropriate and allocate additional funds from Fund 41 as necessary. Is there a motion to authorize the town manager to execute this contract?
I guess I'd just like to make a comment first. I noticed that it's got coconut palms in here, and this council, I believe, on more than one occasion has said that coconut palms are not a good idea in places where people walk underneath, liability-wise, that they fall on people's heads. So
Point?
I'd like to see that coconut palms are replaced with something more appropriate, maybe a native palm. Having said that, I'd move to approve and authorize the town manager to move forward as indicated in the requested motion.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Discussion.
If I may, Mr. Mayor.
Sir.
Can you explain, some of the public is concerned that with the VE version, that looks of what originally put out there are going to change drastically. Can you comment as to, one, if it's going to change, two, what would it look like if it does?
Well, I think the best thing to do, if you'll indulge me, is to bring the project manager from the design team here to kind of list what changes were. But before Paul speaks, I just want to say, our goal is specifically not to do that. Now, clearly we had to do things such as, we had small cells, we made the cells bigger so we would have less foundation and less poles. So it didn't change the look of the fact that we had cells, it's just the size of the cells changed. The nature of the stage changed. We had a custom designed smaller version of the one that we were planning to install at Times Square. That's changed. So, but I'll let Paul walk you through those.
For the record, Paul Benvey with DRMP. I'm the project manager for this exciting project. I would say in terms of look and feel, we're pretty close to what we had before, especially with the uplights and the shade sails and things like that. You're still getting the same flavor. Roger mentioned that we reduced the number of upright poles for the shade sails. Each one of those poles cost $10,000-$20,000 plus the foundation and all that. So we reduced that by about 40%. You have the same exact shaded area. We're just doing it with larger shade sails. So that's the main thing there. And then, as Roger said too, the custom round stage ended up being probably twice as much as we thought it would be, or 3 times as much as what we thought it would be. It became a very intense use of metal and labor to build. So we swapped that out with a mono-sloped waterproof shade structure. So it doesn't have a round feel to it, but it's more of like an open amphitheater look to it. It's similar to a shade sail where it's got stretched fabric, but the fabric in this one is waterproof. So you can put your band equipment and things underneath it and be protected from the rain. Number of trees stayed the same, except for we did remove the specimen tree. We kind of played with it through different iterations. We had it one time in the middle of the park as you came in. That kind of got moved to the side so it would not obstruct the view coming down Old San Carlos. We moved it there. It ended up being a $100,000 diversion of the existing water main that's there. So value engineer it, we ended up taking that tree out of this design. So that's a major point that's different. But really, other than that, the rain garden got a little bit bigger. The artificial turf area got a little smaller. We added an extra seat wall bench So just some minor little things, but I think, you know, the overall feel of the park is very similar to what we presented.
Thanks, Paul.
I have to say, I'm extremely disappointed to have lost the tree. I find it a bit hypocritical on our part that we keep trying to tell everybody in town that they need to have room to plant trees, and we can't find room in an entire small park to plant a large tree. So I guess I would like to make it clear to the rest of council that we've got to find a place to have our town tree somewhere. We have a town tree called a gumbo limbo. We have no beautiful gumbo limbo tree in this entire town. We have a teeny tiny one. Front. I understand that the costs were prohibitive, and therefore, even though it's something that I've been fighting for, I'm willing to step back from that, but just remind everybody that we need to find a place for a beautiful tree in our town.
I pre-warned the vice mayor that this was an issue because it was costing us 5 times the cost of the tree, at the spot that was last chosen. When we originally had it at the head of the parcel, there were some concerns expressed by members of council with regard to visibility. So we didn't automatically take it back to where it was, but I believe that could be done. But more importantly, I committed to the mayor, and I think it's the right thing to do. If that is our town tree, we will find a spot, put a significant size species of that tree and indicate it on one of the town's pieces of property that it is a town tree and it's a gumbo limbo and all the associated information. So that was my commitment to her, and I intend to follow through on that. It just, because of the nature of the parcel at Bayside, it presented some challenges.
Now, we're back to kind of the big restriction here is what caused the weird design with the building, where you've got the water mains or the sewer mains coming off the island going kind of at an off angle down the parcel?
Yeah, so those exist, but those weren't the ones that were conflicting with the root ball of the tree. There's another 16-inch water main that branches off of that runs up and down Old San Carlos and ties into Snug Harbor. That trunk line runs right where that tree was located. So we looked at diverting it. I mean, honestly, and if this was in the middle of Lee County somewhere in a regular economy, that maybe be $10,000 to move that, $20,000 at the most. I think just the location and the timing of this project, it was prohibitive. I mean, over $100,000 to just move a 16-inch water main.
There's nowhere else that's away from all these water mains and sewer mains?
You have a lot of infrastructure down there. We looked iterations of time, right? We had it one time on the east side, closer to Nervous Nellies, and it kind of conflicted with their facade, so we moved it to the middle, and I don't know if it was or not, but we had an idea that would block the coming down Old San Carlos to the pass. We moved it to the left side of the property, and that's where we had this conflict. So I think it could be added back the middle if you wanted to. It's not included in this contract. Done by the town at a later date also.
So this would be like in the rain garden area?
Yeah. That's where we have the tributes, the veterans tributes. So there's just a little couple moving pieces that you'd have to figure out as a part of that process.
I'm sure they tried really hard to find a place to put this tree because none of them wanted to tell me. They dumped it on Roger that he had to be the one to tell me that there was no good place for my tree.
Well, it's an interesting point, you know, I mean, and this is in lots of places, is when a tree block the view, or does a tree become part of the view?
That was part of my point, but it seems to be impossible with all of the infrastructure issues.
And I think Paul made a very important point, and that is that once it's all done, and we actually see the views and see where everything is, we might be able to find a spot for it there. I'm not saying that we can, but we might. But if not, we'll put it somewhere else. But we will have.
I may have to dig up that one out front and put in a bigger one.
We'll find a spot for one. I guarantee that part.
Or we may have to get a new town tree. Okay, and
Paul, if I,
Question?
Mr. Mayor, if I could, Paul, you mentioned briefly the Veterans Memorial. Would you talk about, it's still in its infancy in terms of design and work and formation, but would you talk a little bit about the space that you've preserved for it and what you envision?
I don't have any graphics, but it's the same idea that we talked about before. Roughly 6 foot tall, broken obelisk looking, cut off obelisk looking monument. Several of them, I guess 5 now, with Space Force. It's just an open area that we left as a blank canvas for whoever wants to who wants to run that show. We talked with the veterans before. We provided the area, but I think they're going to have to bring in their own designers, probably coordinate with y'all because it's going to be on your property to make something that you're happy with that also they want as well. It's just an extra level of complexity that provided the area. Here's the canvas. Whenever you're ready to put it in, you guys can put it in.
We have a backup plan. If, we were requested to give the veterans community an opportunity to work on this, so we stepped back, but we have a backup plan in the event that they can't pull it together or they can't reach a consensus or whatever the issue might be. So we will sort of reserve square footage or something. It's just a question of whether they go forward with their plans in the veterans community here, or if they just say they can't pull it together, council decides they waited long enough and want us to do it, then we have a spot for it.
Thank you.
Paul?
I'm sorry, Paul, one quick question. I think, Mr. Town Manager, you may have answered this when we were meeting the other day, but I can't remember. The pier in front of the Bayside Park, is that a separate project, or is that going to be the one that connects the nervous? It's separate? Okay.
Do you think this is going to be, with all the projects going forward, I mean, that we're going to be with one bid that's way over budget? Because I have a friend who was told they had a design for a house, they were working with someone, they told them, we're just booked out, we can't build your house.
Well, I think this project has challenges because it's a little amount of a lot of different things, which is why at Bay Oaks, we've decided that we're going to, rather than have one GC do the whole project, we're breaking the project into basically the trades. So that if you do earthwork and road work, you're going to do the parking lots, the drainage and whatever, but you're not going to do the building. You're going to hire a GC to do the building. We're going to have a field expert do the fields. So because we're breaking it down that way and trying to make it more trade specific, I think we'll get better pricing. So that's going to be our approach there. I mean, it'll still be the overall project, but it's going to put more management on our hands and probably Paul's hands as the CEI for this. But we think that, when you hire one person and they happen to be the GC, well, you're paying them, they're hiring subs and whatever to do the earthwork and drainage and parking lots and stuff like that. So you're paying a premium on top, paying that subcontractor's cost and a premium on top of that. The same thing for the fields. They're just going to hire someone to do the fields, take that person's bill, they're going to mark it up 15, 20 or more % and pass it on to us. So we thought by dividing it out that way, we could save some money, which we are trying to do, and not getting to sort of a situation we have at side where you have a lot of, it's a relatively small project, but it's a lot of little things. And most of them will not be performed by the prime.
You're saying that this last bay with Bayfront Park, that it required a lot of expertise. A lot of different types of expertise.
It has a lot of different elements.
Yeah.
From lighting to landscaping to, some structural elements in the benches and things like that. The stage, it's a lot of different things, but the approach was we were hiring one person to do it. So that person they're not physically doing all the work, or their crew isn't. They're hiring subs who are those trade expertise. Good. So it's two things. You're paying that person a premium in the current economic times, and then plus you're paying a percentage on top of that for the GC to manage that work. So Having seen this, we immediately recognize that that approach won't work for Bay Oaks, so we've diverted from that.
These new benches that are being put in, they're going to be part of the memorial bench program if people want.
People will be able to purchase it's a standalone bench or a section of bench, but I believe it's either, we'll be able to continue to have a memorial bench. That's what people wanted.
One more quick question, it's a small one, but I see that the stub outs are still staying for the water fountain,
Drinking fountain.
I guess, yeah. Is that, I'm assuming that's something the town's gonna take care of after?
Yes, yeah.
Do
So
we have a plan as to like a time frame? Is it gonna be done when the park is done, or is it gonna be done later?
We suspect that cost will be, be discussed when the project is done, whether we can squeeze it into this fiscal year's budget or it has to be an add-on for next fiscal year. But I don't imagine that December of next year it won't be in under some.
Is it gonna be the standard drinking fountain, or is it gonna be one of those bottle fillers that you see everywhere now? It's probably.
It's going to probably be a place for a dog bowl, a place to fill your water bottle, and a place to drink, all three.
Do we have any of that, unrelated to this, do we have any of that going in at the Bay Oaks project and the Times Square project?
Both.
Okay,
They're pretty
figured
cool.
as much. Perfect.
They're pretty modern.
Yeah, they're cool looking, I just. That's all I had.
Thank you, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, the motion was made to approve the contract. It was seconded. It's been thoroughly discussed. Any objection? Motion carries unanimously. Move on to the next item, which is the STA number 16, addition Tier 1 services. This is to authorize the town manager to approve STA number 16 for additional Tier 1 services with Tetra Tech under contract number 20-22-AD for $52,105. Roger, do you want to comment quickly on
I
this?
do. So, Mr. Mayor and members of council, you probably recall that a recent meeting you approved the consultant we used to help us secure the funding in Tallahassee and remain in compliance with the SRF grants, loans. So this is to finalize the permitting for the streets, and our objective here is as soon as we complete the downtown streets, which were worst case April, hopefully sooner, we'll immediately transition into starting to do the side streets. And this group of side streets are the ones that we actually have flooding problems. You may recall the prior side streets that we worked on, while they did have some minor drainage issues, they were picked because they were dry and they could absorb the flow from Cerro Boulevard, the joint outfall streets. These are the streets that Tetra Tech in the town's stormwater master plan had identified as being the worst streets in terms of localized flooding. So we're very anxious to get to these and address some of those problems that we've all been hearing about for many years.
You know off the top of your head what some of those streets might be, or?
I'm sure Christie can relate them from memory almost.
We're listed on the blue
It's
sheet here.
right in the middle of the page. 111.
11. Okay, well, I can look at that later. Was there a motion to authorize the town manager to approve this contract?
Make a motion to authorize the town manager to approve the contract.
Moved? Is it
Second.
seconded? Further discussion? Any objection to the motion? Motion carries unanimously. Okay, the item C is Clean Vessel Act grant, pump out boat replacement. This is to authorize town staff to apply to the state for Clean Vessel Act grant, the trade-in and purchase of a replacement pump-out boat from Pump Out USA in the amount of $153,754.67, and authorize the town manager to execute contract documents. Trade-in value equals the grant match.
All right, so Mr. Mayor, members of council, this grant requires a 25% match. We get 75% from the state, and we have been received trade-in value estimate, which will cover that. So basically, we can upgrade to a new boat at no additional cost to the town.
Good.
And our current boat is starting to have some maintenance issues that it's going to get worse, so right time to trade up.
Well, if you can get Pump Out USA to throw in a dock for it, we'll be all set. But, is there a motion to,
We're getting the folding one. No,
okay. Is there a motion to authorize the town manager to apply for this grant for town staff?
I'll make, okay. I'll move to authorize the town manager to move forward the grant, applying for the grant.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Any objection? Motion carries unanimously. Okay, final public comment. Is there anyone else from the public that wishes to speak? How many of you all left? Okay, hearing none, we'll move on to town manager's items. Town manager.
So, Mr. Mayor, members of council, as in the first session of public comment, we have been working with TPI, Margaritaville, and they've been working with their neighbors adjacent to the project to try to figure out how we're going to bring in all the supplies needed to construct these buildings in a way that will cause the least amount of inconvenience to the public. And attached to in the agenda is a diagram which basically shows that what we typically think about is the Fifth Street leaving the island and going over the bridge road that runs along in front of Lighthouse. W deploying flag to have vehicles come over the Matanzas Bridge and go the reverse way through that cutout right into, I guess, the Ocean Jewel / Seafarers property to then supply the project, the adjacent project. And know that there is a lot of cooperation on the part of the Lighthouse with respect to this, and that should not be so unsaid. They understand that that they will have to deal with this increased traffic issue, and obviously they were concerned about it, but they definitely are willing to do what they could do to advance getting the project completed as quickly as possible, because that's to everyone's benefit, including theirs. So I don't know if the people from Dangerous Time want to have anything further to say, but we do believe that this is the best approach. I'm going to bring it to council, have you all indicate your support for it, hopefully today, and to begin to use this meeting and the outcome of this meeting to inform the public about what will be coming.
Ready to move? Come on up.
Questions or concerns?
State your name one more time.
Sorry, Brandon Prince with D'Angelo.
Brandon, thank you.
Well, how are the trucks going to get, I see where they're going to come across the Seafarers. How are they going to get to that entry point? They're going to come around through Crescent?
They're going to cut right in.
They're going to cut right in, come over the bridge and take a left in there?
Well, bear to the left and just go straight through the property right in.
It's hard work.
We'll use flagmen at that time. Traffic and maintain traffic.
Right.
Brandon, is your strategy, if you will, to get most of the building supplies in before season, just and position them in the property before the traffic really is exciting?
So it will be ongoing through the course of construction. It's not just a certain time period. It will be a higher duration. Main focus is to alleviate the traffic off of Estero, having trucks stop on Estero, having to back in. It just gives an easier route. That way we're the time limit on holding traffic on Estero.
You're not, for your own purposes, for your trucks getting stuck in traffic, you're not going to try to position a lot of the supplies ahead of time, I guess, or is that impractical?
As far as means and methods of goods on site, I mean, we try to get as many deliveries as possible, but it's just depending on the phase of construction, it draw at one time but finish. But obviously, we want to limit the amount of congestion, but it will, like I said, it'll be ongoing.
This is going to be a year's worth of trucks pretty much coming over. Obviously they're going to probably try to come, in the mornings, I would say, or late at night versus the middle of the day, but it's going to be continuous. And particularly with the cast concrete columns and steel, and then the concrete, really hundreds and hundreds of concrete trucks. So it'd be significant. This is for this island, this is a large project. For those of you who've been around long enough to remember some of the larger projects where that got built, remember how many vehicles and trucks and whatever is required. But those were under the traffic conditions back in the day, and these will be under our current traffic conditions, so it'll be quite the scene.
Not the same.
Very good. All right, very good, thank you.
Brandon, I can't understand why John DeAngelis, a man of his stature and his company, doesn't have a helicopter that can just drop supplies down over the project site and on from there.
Have to keep that in mind on the
All
next
right,
project.
ask him to call Trump and see how he did it, I guess, but,
Mayor, if I could-
Yes, sir.
Just a quick question. You had mentioned that this is going to be closed throughout the duration of the project.
Correct.
When is the start time? When do you expect this to be closed down? Starting date?
Just as soon as the work on Crescent Street is
Sometime, what I heard, and I don't know if this is official or just rumor or estimates, but around the first of the year.
Is there any plans, any plans to open it up potentially for busy holiday weekends like New Year's Eve, Shrimp Fest, just for the day of the event?
Well, I think,
Is it
you
feasible,
know,
I guess?
our typical contractors will shut down for, you know, things around weekends and holidays. But these guys have, I believe, have a very, very tight schedule commitment to get this project done. And I don't know that there's a whole lot of flex in that. But I think that they'll try to, they won't necessarily stop work, but they may try to time the deliveries so that deliveries are not on that particular day.
I guess to Roger's point, it's something that we can take a look at on a case-by-case scenario. Just, obviously, we want to work together.
Brandon, your goal, your date certain, if you will, is August, year and a half from now, roughly? Is that still the ribbon cutting?
Depends on how you say, what you say about this.
And with your Purdue engineering background, I'm sure you'll be able to meet that deadline, I'm sure, right?
Oh, there.
Goal is to be there.
Snuck it in
There
there,
it goes.
didn't he? All
They
right,
have those roots.
Boilermakers. Any other questions for Brandon? All right, well, thanks for coming in and keeping us in the loop, and giving my best to John and this team.
Will do.
And we'll look forward to your progress. And I'm sure the owner is flexible in his contract with you as far as Shrimp Festival and such, but I'll have to address that with Mr. Torgerson, but I'm sure he's pretty flexible on those lines.
And I could tell you, I've received, I don't know about the rest of my council members, but I've received a lot of feedback from people about the cleanliness and the professionalism you guys are doing over there. So keep up the great work. Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah, good point.
See if you have any gray hairs in a year and a half.
Right.
All right, thank you. I
Thank you,
appreciate
Brandon.
it.
Anything else you wanted to add, or?
No, I think.
Okay, all right, good, man. Thank you. Okay, Roger.
So item B on the town manager's items is the entrance signs to the town. We provide you with graphics. This is part of our ongoing work to try to improve the look and feel of town of Fort Myers Beach. The style sign we have is sort of is out of date. It's outlived its working life, if you will, and you know, with our new marketing program that the council approved, and our cleaning up our front porch, so to speak. This was the design that staff came up with, and personally like it a lot, but I hope you will too. And the comments about it, we'd like to hear those today.
This first one, is that showing uplights?
Yes, sir.
Is that the one from the north or the south side?
They'll both be identical. The location, just to refresh everyone's memory, is as soon as you come over to Big Cardinals Bridge, there's one right there, sort of.
I have a feeling that one's going to change, don't you?
Well, we'll make sure the siding is consistent with the
Might have
county.
to
and their new
elevate it a little
project.
bit.
And then on the other side, it's right before you go over the Matanzas Bridge on the right-hand side.
Yes.
That will also be fit into a location around the changes that FDOT will be making to that area, but will be in that general vicinity.
All right, Roger, would you say that locations one more time again?
Okay, so when you come over the Matanzas Bridge, before you get over the bridge, it's on the right-hand side.
On the San Carlos Island side.
Yeah. On the San Carlos Island side. It's right there. And, as you come over Big Carlos Pass Bridge. This side.
Okay, all right, thank you.
The one on Big Carlos is on Fort Myers Beach, the other one is actually technically just off the.
But yet, the only concern I really see, I like the signs, Roger, but my concern is that the lighting is particularly the one on the south end of the island that might cause some turtle lighting issues if it's visible from the beach.
We'll talk to the sign designer and make sure that gets.
That up at night. Okay, anything else, Roger?
That's it for today, thank you.
Thank you. Town Attorney?
All is quiet on the western front.
Beautiful, beautiful. Okay, thank you. Council members, start with you, Councilman Beach.
One thing that's come up, and I've heard this kind of from numerous different sources, numerous different levels, is that we don't really have a kind of a concrete process on how to deal with fines that have been accrued by people who are through all the legal, all their legal options, but are either still accruing or not paying fines. That if we could direct our attorney and our town manager to come up with a calendar and a way to have a finite time limit on how long these fines are go on for before we take some kind of action.
Any comment, Mr. Attorney?
The current system, obviously, as I've said all along, is designed and the property owner works with the city and the town staff to bring the property into compliance. Obviously, there are a number of situations, not a large, where, but nonetheless, there are some situations where the property owner has failed to work with town staff. As a result, fines have accrued to the point, and it's gotten to the point where, you know, we've requested the special magistrate to give us the authority to record an order that constitutes a lien against the property. And now, historically, the town has waited until either a sale, refinance, or some other type of thing that triggers title issues, and the property owner that approaches us and the situation is resolved, and ultimately they come before you under the code to ask for a reduction in the accrued fine. We haven't had many of those recently, as you all know. So in those situations, we're at the point where they're just accruing daily fines in some instances, and the amount of the lien that is accrued is significant. Under normal circumstances, assuming they're not homesteaded property, which some of them are, then we would, we can bring them before you and ask for your authorization to take further enforcement action, which in most instances is going to be some form of legal action, either to foreclose on that lien or to seek injunctive relief to enforce the code enforcement order through circuit court action.
So I'm not sure what it is you're asking, Bill. Are you wanting to set a number where that's when we go after a lien?
Well, essentially not having the sale of a property as a trigger to resolve all these issues. Have some kind of
So you're
calendar.
wanting
Not waiting till then.
Just some kind of calendar where you would say, and they would, I'm just setting an example because I'm not trying to pretend to understand the legal nuances, but say that you've exhausted all your legal options. You've gone through the magistrate, you've done an appeal, whatever. And you would have X number of days to come before town council to ask for a reduction. And then after that, there'd be X number of days before some other action would take the place. I was at a little neighborhood get together, and one of the neighbors, they bought a house where the people before them had put something up that they weren't allowed, and they were they were not cooperating with town, like this said. So eventually, and this was I understand the sellers were not particularly, on the up and up from things they did. And so, they didn't catch any kind of due diligence. They bought the property, and then they had to resolve this after buying it. Had any help, any action they take against the seller. So those kind of instances, I think if you wait for the sale to be the trigger to resolve it, then you're really waiting too late.
If we aggressively pursue it before a sale is in progress, then that's costing the town legal fees.
I think though, part of it is, there's certainly judgments that can be made on the calendar. One is, what's it worth? If you have a $500 fine, are you going to go and spend thousands of dollars? But the other is, what if it's and like you said, if it's a homesteaded property where certain actions are limited, but then we have others that are figures that just drag on forever and there's no mechanism now to try to get those cleared up.
We have a mechanism, it's just that we don't have anything that triggers us to pursue it until there's sale or refinance.
Right. Or it goes on indefinitely.
I'm not sure that it's cost effective for the town to necessarily be more aggressive than we are, because then we would be incurring attorney fees to go after things that we may not be able to collect on. We're spending money to not get money in return.
Well, then.
And your situation, it's the buyer's fault that they didn't do their due diligence.
Well, okay, there's a couple points there I'd make. Because one is, I'm not offering some kind of solution. What I'm asking for is to have our staff suggest something that would work for them. And that can include triggers that may have to do with the amount or the nature of the fine. But the other is to say that we're just going to let this go. We're going to take any action at all, and we're going to put all the burden of this on the buyers to do a due diligence, and maybe they're not aware that the process or the title company doesn't catch, which has happened. I think it's a little sharp to me. It's a little bit putting a burden on somebody who had nothing to do with accruing these fines.
Normally, if the seller wants the sale to go through, got a ready and willing buyer there, they'll work to clean that up themselves to effectuate the sale, typically. Sounds like that one went, I don't know how that one slipped through, but normally that's the way it would work.
It also, and I don't know, of course, it's not really my business to understand how like a title company would operate, what they would be able to find. Now, if there's an outstanding fine that is not generated any kind of action by the town to put a lien on the property, then how does the title company find out about that? They have to actually contact the town specifically and ask if there's any outstanding fines.
And do we have a number at which we go in and ask for a lien? Say, if your fines have accrued to $25,000, that's when we start asking for liens?
No, under the statute, it's after, if the property has not been brought into compliance within 3 months' time, the statute allows us to request from the special magistrate the authority to.
It could be a smaller number.
Yeah, it can depend, and there are a couple of properties out there that are not only regular offenders but regular non-compliance.
Bill, I don't know that there's anything we can do with this. I understand your issue, and it's vexing, but
There's a cost.
yeah, I mean, you can spend a lot in attorney fees going after something and then collect a lot less than what you spent on attorney fees going after it.
You can, and that certainly is one of the factors that would go into whatever they would suggest to us to maybe make this a little more formal, is the amount. But then if you don't do anything, then we're back to the same thing where if someone is not selling, they can accrue fines forever and maybe wait until they think they have a town council that's more conducive to reducing their fines, or just let it go until they sell and maybe it doesn't get caught up.
It's not the town's duty to be protecting the buyers. We can't cross that.
It's also by never taking any action on fines, what does that say for our enforcement?
We're taking action when it becomes appropriately financially responsible for us to do, is the I'm seeing it. And I share your frustration. I'm not saying that I disagree with you.
The
I
only
just
diff-
don't see,
Oh, the difference that I see, the one difference that I see is actually having a calendar-based approach instead of saying waiting until it sells, because it could be 10, 20 years for something.
Historically, in certain situations, my recommendation has been to authorization from the governing body to injunctive relief. Have a final order of the special magistrate that's non-appealable. The time has passed. You have all the legal aspects of you can't relitigate the issue. And because, as I was quoted once as saying, what's the value of junk? You've gotten authorization to go after someone who is conducting basically operating a junkyard out of their house, out of their residential property, and the value of that, close on that. And again, if it's homestead, then you have that issue as well.
My question to the council is just, do we want the town staff to come up with a plan that we can discuss? Not.
I personally feel we already have a plan. It's the attorney's duty to bring stuff to us when he believes it's appropriate financially, go after it, and he does. He comes in and says, hey, these people that are in the mooring field are so far behind, I need to pursue them. That's his job, to bring things to our attention when it's appropriate. So I feel that we have a plan in place.
I will get with staff, we'll get with code enforcement staff, with Ms. Saunders, and we'll evaluate if there's any current cases where there's an outstanding violation with large fines that have accrued, and report back to you and get some direction from you all.
About that, Bill, like a quarterly report from the attorney on problem properties or whatever.
I'm okay with that.
All right, anything else, sir?
That's it.
Councilman Adderholt.
A little bit lighter note, we had a CellCab meeting last Thursday, and we have been discussing for some time, and this is probably a little premature at this point, but I don't want the council to be surprised by it, and I also want to give you a heads up. We have been discussing, because not only is the Mound House under the jurisdiction, but as Newton Park is as well, and the building at Newton Park's been going through some wonderful renovations and painting and so forth, and it's doing great. Hopefully it'll have some more life post-COVID, but one of the challenges that we've been wrestling with is the bocce ball courts at Newton Park. I'm sure extremely well-intentioned at the time. I'm at Newton Park 3-4 times a week, and I've never seen anybody play bocce ball, and I don't think any of my colleagues have seen anybody play bocce ball. And sadly, because there's sand in there, I think the wild cats have thought that sand is for different purposes, and so it has a certain odor to it, and it just hasn't been. It's such a neat piece of property. One of the things we kicked around, I was able to go on the internet and find an example that I think is really interesting. As you look out, as you're standing in Newton Park, you're looking out towards the ocean. As you all remember, there's I don't know if seawall's the right word, but it's elevated maybe about 3 feet. Half of the park is where then you go down to the beach. People love to sit up on that elevated part of the beach. You'll see a lot of people stake out their claim early on with blankets and so forth. So not where the plants are, but where there's open space. A lot of seniors love to put their chairs up there because it just has a certain elevation to it. And where the bocce ball courts are, it's just that area is rarely used. And one of the things we've talked about is potentially putting a couple swing sets in that area, replacing the bocce ball courts, a way where you would face the ocean, you would swing out towards the ocean. Again, you'd have this little drop-off area, so you're a little bit elevated, so it would really be a cool venue to sit. And of course, then the challenge is, how do you find a swing set that our town attorney would be comfortable with for liability purposes? How do you prevent people from sleeping on it, et cetera? And how do you have it look aesthetically pleasing, particularly with that beautiful ocean view? And an example at the District of Columbia Harbor, I don't know if you guys got your CellCab minutes, but I'll pass this around. But it has a beautiful arch And then it has two chains, and two or three people could sit on the swing, and so you couldn't get too wild. And of course, you'd have the soft ground underneath you. And then, but the bench is such where you really couldn't sleep on it, but you still could sit comfortably on it. And imagine sitting on those swings. Again, it would be a 2 or 3 person swing, and looking at the sunset, elevated in that area on Newton Park, such a beautiful piece of property. It could be really a cool addition to the park. So, again, it's early stages, but I just wanted to make sure the council was comfortable. I was talking with the town manager earlier about potentially beginning just to have them do a little research into the costs, get a cost estimate, and just get a sense of the experience that they've had in DC with these particular swings. You can see there's 3 or 4 of them. I don't know if you guys have seen them. I'll pass this around. That's a picture of it. But I just think that's a way to repurpose that use of Newton Park. It wouldn't obstruct the view of the ocean. It has kind of a cool artistic look to it. And again, I think that'd be a pretty valuable seat come sunset, or even just throughout the day as that breeze comes off the ocean. But just wanted to make sure you had some food for thought on that. And if it's cost prohibitive, then we'll re-examine it. But at this point, we don't even know how much these would cost. And I just think it would be a nice addition to Newton Park. And my colleagues on the CellCab committee were very supportive of it as well. So anyways, just thought I'd throw that out there for your digestion and just make sure it's okay with everybody, for at least the town manager and his team to just take a little bit deeper dive into it and see what the costs and the materials and the town attorney to take a look at the liability issues involved and see if it's something worth pursuing.
Might I suggest that we add to the idea that rather than just having memorial benches, we might have memorial swings that people in the community could pay for the purchase of one and
I love it.
put a plaque on it?
I love it. That'd be great. Anything to help with offset those costs.
Good idea. I think the CellCab should take a swing at it.
Beautiful.
Well, you hit that one right out of the park.
Oh, that hurts.
You know something, Jim? Are you finished?
Yes,
Okay. You brought back some fond memories to me of Jim and Ellie Newton themselves sitting on that seawall, and they would wave to to people out on the beach there, and so it's there's been a lot of sitting on that wall over the years. But, Vice Mayor, anything?
Yes, the Anchorage Advisory Committee did pass a motion asking us to authorize staff to explore whether the Virginia property could be used for a place to store the boat. They're not asking for allocation of funds, just asking the council to authorize staff to explore that and whether it's feasible or not. They did ask for council motion by specific motion.
Are you making a motion?
Well, I don't know that just to authorize staff to explore something, whether we have to have a formal motion, just consensus.
Well, just to be clear, we can look into that issue and bring back a report to town council, but we won't get very far without having to spend some money. Won't be a lot, but we'll have to spend some money to do it. And as long as you're comfortable with that, we can proceed and try to figure out between researching the legality of the property and doing some work with our coastal engineering team to see the way for us to get it done there.
You need a motion was Bill's question.
Oh,
By
as long as
consensus.
we all agree
authorize.
that we understand there'll be some money spent, we don't need one. Get this direction.
Well, I concur.
Concur, yeah.
Thank you.
Probably have
On
to.
behalf of the AAC, thank you.
Else?
That's it?
Councilman Allers.
Just a brief thing. This Wednesday at the Women's Club at 6:30, Tiffany Wood, the crime prevention practitioner with the Lee County Sheriff's Community Response Unit, and the bomb squad, Lee County's bomb squad, will be bringing their robot and their bomb sniffing dog out to do a presentation out on the lawn. So anyone that it's open to, couples, individuals, whoever would like to come out and see it, I think it might be a really neat opportunity for you to get an in-depth look at kind of what goes on behind the scenes if anybody wants to come out and see a spectacle.
They need any extra ordinance?
Okay. Oh, but they need a volunteer to suit up. Are you volunteering, Mr. Mayor?
I have to wear my chest protector, which, by the way, I may be wearing tomorrow. Anything else? No. Tomorrow is a big day here in Fort Myers Beach. A little shout out. It's opening day of softball season for the 50 and older gang. And their commissioner, Mr. Howie Hoffman, old friend, has asked me to throw out the first pitch tomorrow. So I'll be up all night long working on my slow pitch, underhand pitch, and hopefully I won't embarrass myself on the diamond tomorrow morning. But, that's all I have. Anything else for the good of the order here? Not, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Moved.
See everyone at 1 o'clock.
Pardon?
See everybody at 1 o'clock.
There's second, no objection.
objection.
We're adjourned at 11:27.